So a little about me. My name is, I'm an engineer by training, Modupeoluwa Soetan. Generally, right, I have a master's in sustainable development. I'm doing another one in transition engineering. So I'm in between energy and sustainability basically. And I just want to share a couple of some of my thoughts because presently looks to me that we are dealing with energy as a system on its own when actually it's part of a system that other things affect what happens and what doesn't happen. So we have one pathway that's ICE, internal combustion engine, and other things that hasn't worked well or hasn't worked as well as should have worked. And then we have another pathway that seems to have left this path to this other path of renewable energy, where it seems to be the El Dorado, just renewable energy, just make everything renewable, just make everything renewable. We're not discussing the concomitants of the transition, but the concomitants of choosing another path and getting locked into that path and how that will affect or may affect, certain things. Just want to just bring a couple of things, a couple of thoughts, and then we can discuss and say, okay, where we are going as a world, does this path of renewable energy, does it take us there? If it doesn't take us there, then should we begin to make adjustments now before we get extra locked in like we have for fossil fuels, and then the transition becomes a problem in future. So I'll just be going through my slides now, and you can stop to ask questions. You can ask questions at the end. I'm hoping to be a discussion rather than a lecture. So, okay, so first of all, I'll discuss something that is very close to my heart. That's energy poverty. Not close to my heart, something that I don't think a lot of people consider. Well, according to the World Bank, about a third of the world rely on polluting fuels. Now, that leads to 3.2 million deaths, and that's a lot. We all around the world, especially in the global north, right? People are having trouble heating their homes, people are having trouble, doing basic things that they should use energy for. And it's become a real issue, energy poverty, such that most EU countries are now beginning to discuss the issue. Why do we have such energy poverty? Well, we understand that renewable energy come from not sources that cannot be depleted. So how come right now with all the investments we've done, both in fossil fuels and in renewable energy, and there is a lot of energy poverty. And it's not just a thing confined to the global south. And many of the things we hear about is about the global south. Oh, this is global south. This actually is a growing concern in the global north. People are unable to afford electricity. And actually, the term energy poverty, according to Bodman, means if you're spending more than 10% of your income your energy needs. And if I look at Nigeria, that means most of us will be energy poor. But even in so-called advanced countries, there is a lot of issues right now being able to afford basic energy needs. And for me, and myself and Ibrahim have a lot of discussion on things like this. Energy is a critical resource, and energy should be looked. I mean, should be taken as one of the things that is free, not free. I mean, it's available to everybody and can be used. And I don't think any country in the world should allow that people control, their energy sources because then they're going to have problems. So basically, in the world we live in today, there is energy poverty, and it's a big issue, and it's a growing issue, and it's something I honestly believe that if we know, change certain things, if we put energy into a system and not a system as itself, if we see the things that connect to energy, then we can begin to work on other things in the system to ensure that energy, according to the SG7, is reliable, is modern, things like that the SG7 says we are to have. Now, okay, so global energy sources, I just wanted to compare energy sources from 1900 to 2020. You will see from this graph that um, renewable energy sources generally are increasing. Maybe they are not as much as It's not as much as sorry, hold on, just get the graph properly. It's not as much as we want it, but you can see that over time, renewable energy sources, we are getting more and more of that. They are coming part of the energy mix. Wind, solar, nuclear is being reduced now because of the present challenges. I'm sure you don't know about Fukushima and the challenge of nuclear energy. So basically, right, it's a case of renewable energies in the mix, or the energy mix has been increasing over time, and that's a good thing. Or I think it's a good thing, but I also think that other things around it needs to be looked at so we can enjoy the greatest benefits of things like that. Now, I decided to, before we talk about renewable energy, so you don't think I'm an alarmist of some sort. I said, okay, let's look at the our annual carbon dioxide emission year on year from 1965 when they started taking data to 2023. We realized that more or less we only had a few dips, and the dips maybe COVID and the war in Russia. But generally, right, there's almost been a steady rise of our annual carbon dioxide emission. That means that the energy use of fossil fuels, even though renewable energy, which I'm going to show later, in the mix has increased, the increase of renewable energy has not really brought about substantial changes in the growth of carbon dioxide consumption. That means something else is happening because we're having more renewables, but somehow the carbon emitted is also still growing. So if both of them are growing at the same time, now begin to start to think, are we on the right path? Are there things we're not considering? Which one things I am hoping to engage in this discussion? We are emitting more CO2, which is bad for the atmosphere based on science, but somehow in the energy mix, renewable energy is also increasing. So if renewable energy is increasing, we'll expect, from the 2000s and all that, the carbon dioxide emitted should have been decreasing because there's been an increase in the renewable energy mix generally, but that has not been the case. So that's something I want people to think about and consider. Our CO2 emission has increased. Our renewable energy component energy mix has also increased. There's something that doesn't add up. As they say in these days, the math is not mathing, but we'll consider some of those things later. I decided to show this graph also because cumulatively now, we are very close to the failure line. The failure line is about 3 point something. We are very, very close to the failure line. And if you're not careful, in the next decade or so, we may get to the failure line, which will be that there'll be a temperature increase of 3% Celsius, which well, it's anticipated to cause a lot of issues around the world, rise in water levels, increase, heat increase, all these other things. But if you look at this graph now, there's almost the accumulation the graph has increased almost at a steady rate, and then so that means that there's something that we are missing in the whole equation. We are emitting more CO2, we're increasing renewable energies. In this discussion, right, the types of energy I'm looking at is really going to be the first two: solar, wind, hydro. Geothermal is, it's difficult. You have to go to the earth crust. Biofuels are definitely not sustainable. We're not going to discuss that at all because that would mean they're going to be taking land that can be used for food to grow things that they're going to convert into fuel, which obviously distorts everything. So biofuels as a sustainable renewable energy source is a no-no. It's completely inappropriate because it's going to be taking land, it's going to be taking water. Then you plant. After you plant, then you have to use energy to process. Then you have to use, and then the efficiency of the results that you get is also not high enough. So unless you have limited resource, which obviously we don't have, biofuels is out. Geothermal is difficult, right? And it's cannot be done on a large scale. Hydro is, some people term it as renewable, some don't term it as renewable because you have to build a dam, you have to store water, and you have to most likely displace people. You affect the flora and the fauna in the place. You redirect things. You affect livelihoods of those that live around the river. And peradventure, there's an issue, and the dam breaks. There's going to be a lot of problems for those that live around there. But somehow, it's the only renewable energy source that you can actually predict. Wind and solar, are intermittent, which we'll discuss about later. So it's difficult, right, to build your energy needs based only on wind and solar, because the way that they are, you're coming on sunlight, which you don't know how when it can be cloudy days, how it affects things. You're discussing wind, where you can't really measure wind. You can have wind profiles for a day, wind profiles per hour, but somehow you can't measure it per minute, where obviously that affects the amount of energy that is able to generate. So I've been discussing about the growth in solar energy and renewable energy in energy mix, and then juxtaposing that to the increase in CO2 and obviously the cumulative increase in CO2 emitted. So I decided to show this graph now. In this graph, oil is still the major, oil is major, 32. But if you realize that now, renewables apart from solar is the next, and this is 2023. And this is from Shell company they have a site that they use that they measure all these things, and we're able to use their data because we know it's something that is well done. So it's the next thing after oil is renewables. That means you'll expect that right now the CO2 emissions should have been reducing. Right now, we should be able to begin to see the effect or the cumulative effect of the continual usage of renewable energies. Now, this renewable energies is just wind and solar. Because water, if you add water to it actually matches oil in the energy mix. So that means if you notice, hydro is 6%, renewables, that's wind and water, wind and solar, sorry, is 27%. Adding that together, that's like 33%, which is actually greater than oil. So we now begin to wonder. So the question now to pose now, what I want to start thinking about is how come with renewable energy having about a third, almost a third of the energy mix that we are not yet seeing the corresponding decrease in the emissions of CO2. Is something there are other things we need to consider. Is this the way to actually go? Are we changing one path that isn't sustainable, oil, for another part also that probably may also not be sustainable in the long term based on the results that we are getting? Now, no, now we're not we're not I'm not talking about future things. I'm looking at data over the years. So we're saying for the last 10 years, 15 years, renewables have played a major part. So you will expect to actually be somehow see that there should have been reduction in CO2 emitted if the path of renewables actually delivers on the promise that it's supposed to deliver on. Now, like I said, I have a master's in sustainable development from the best schools around. I think we are number one. Sussex is number one in sustainable development all around the world. So I'm just going to use Brundtland. There's a UN set up a Brundtland Commission in 1987. This is what they define sustainability as. And I like it because it's very succinct, it's very straight to the point, meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs. So we're able to meet the needs of present. People would like to say, okay, let's look at our children. Let's let's provide things for our children. If you deny the present needs, it obviously isn't going to work because people have to survive. You cannot try to push things into the future when people today will have a deficit of their needs not being met. You're almost always going to run into trouble. Actually, always going to run into trouble in that regard. That's why I like this definition of sustainability: meet the needs of the present generation, don't compromise the needs of future generations to meet their own needs. So I said the core issues are to basically meet present needs, to ensure future generations can meet their own needs. Now, let's look at renewable energy sources, wind, solar, to an extent hydro. How does it meet present needs? Now, first of all, we all know that, well, if you don't know, I'm telling you now, resource use. There's mining, and if you read Time magazine, if you check this time, the link to this Time article I put there, there's child labor in Congo because of mining of metals that have to be used in in going ahead to actually produce solar cells, wind turbines. So let's increase in child labor. At the same time, right, the things that we are using to actually build these artifacts we are using to capture renewable energy, they themselves are non-renewable. That means we know the way oil is non-renewable, and I'll discuss energy with some things in later slides. That means these things have a, a finite deposit. That means it may be easier now, cheaper now to mine, but the more we use, the more difficult it will be to mine, because then depletion of those resource will have come into play. And as we know, we have to start looking for more of the newer ways, which will be, if I may say so, more energy intensive ways of mining this product, to these minerals, to be able now to take them to use to capture renewable energy sources like the wind and solar power, to for us to be able to use. So first of all, meeting future needs, we need to realize that the materials we use to produce these things, the solar panels, the wind turbines, all the materials used are finite. The problem with that is the more we take, the more expensive it will get to take. The more we take, the more energy intensive it will be to take. You know, like if you look at, if I use the oil and gas industry as a case study, you know, things about, you know, shale gas. Shale gas wouldn't have been profitable at some in years gone by, because there was an abundance of oil in several other places. But with the depletion of that now, you know, we now look at shale gas and other ways to actually, you know, do well re-entries, to be able to improve, or well, not improve actually, to be able to actually get the oil we need to use. The same thing applies, same logic applies in this regard. The materials we are using to actually produce artifacts we are using to capture these the non-renewable sources, sources that don't deplete, wind, solar doesn't deplete, but the materials we use to build them are finite. So now we can mine them easily. I mean, and even now we're having problems with mining, because if you check now, Congo is having problems. Even Nigeria having problems with child mining. And I heard somebody say, and I think it's the truth, like most of the issues around banditry in Nigeria, one of my friends did some research and he said most of the issues around banditry in Nigeria is actually based on resource control. There's something to be mined there. So people are mining things and they're mining illegally, but they've now created unrest in surrounding communities so they can keep mining illegally. And this is where this is at this point that these things are abundant. Now imagine a scenario where we've depleted, maybe in 50 years, we've depleted this resource and we still need them to be able to produce the artifacts. Because generally, right, wind turbine takes like 30 years, solar panel like 25 years. So we'll know at some point, the more we use them, the more materials we will need, the more materials we need, the more depletion occurs, and more depletion occurs, the more expensive, both in terms of money and energy, it will be to keep mining. So think about that. Energy used in mining of materials and production, useful life. Energy is used in mining, like I said, obviously that is energy mining. Most of the energy used in mining now, it really isn't renewable energy. And I'm not sure renewable energy can do that, you know. And in production also, you know, energy used in producing this artifact is also mostly non-renewable sources. But even if you use renewable sources, right, and after the useful life, if it can be recycled, then they're going to use energy to waste. I'm going to have to do another input of energy to recycle it. But funny thing, most wind turbine blades can't be recycled because they're made of composite material. Some other panels may not be able to recycle. So most of these things may go into the landfill later, creating another problem, which we also will discuss later. Okay, so I discussed this earlier. You know, the need for mind, for need for the things that have been produced. I know the world we live in, Trump wants to go to Greenland because they have rare earth metals. So we can see that metals are beginning to play a significant role in the geopolitics of today. Now imagine now that if all the energy we have in that sense is renewable energy, dependent on certain minerals that are found in certain places, either in Greenland, either in global south, you obviously will know that there's also obviously going to be issues around those countries. Stronger countries will look for ways to actually undermine weaker countries. And the practices that go on now of child labor, right? About 30% of those in the mines are women that are open to sexual harassment and all. So that itself creates room for thought. Is this the path we want to get locked into? Is this the path we want to follow? Efficiency. Apart from hydro, I mean, hydro also now actually uses turbines. The hydro drives the turbines drive whatever and create electricity. Apart from hydro, all other renewable resources, that is, I'm discarding both biofuels and geothermal, are intermittent. That means that we cannot actually predict how well these things will do. People say a lot that, Nigeria, northern Nigeria, just filling with solar panels. They forget or they don't know that direct sunlight is what is needed. Direct sunlight. So panels are made in such a way that dust, which is prevalent in northern Nigeria, affects the efficiency. Number one. Number two, because most of the panels are made in more temperate regions, beyond a particular temperature, every increase in temperature reduces efficiency. That means you have to, well, I think NESP is making panels for Nigeria that are more attuned to our temperature range. So what it means is that most of the panels we import, beyond a particular temperature, which we go beyond, maybe I think maybe 23 or so, remember, every increase in temperature reduces the efficiency. So there's an issue. First of all, there is the sun is intermittent, or the energy source, which is the sunlight is intermittent. Second, there's a lot of dust, and dust affects the efficiency of solar panels itself. And the third thing is about, even especially for us in the tropics, heat beyond a particular point, there is a relationship between heat as in temperature of the surface of the solar panel and the efficiency. It goes beyond a particular temperature, the efficiency reduces. So efficiency of panels basically, have something to think about. And even wind turbines, the efficiency, I mean, wind is intermittent. That's why people have gone offshore now, and that's better, right? But even then, you have to be careful about how much wind you can generate. There's efficiency is increasing, but it's also still low. Now, people say we can store in batteries. I like to say, if you introduce, there's a concept called energy return on energy investment. That means energy that I put in based on energy I get out of it. So if I put in, say, 10 kilojoules and I'm getting out 3 or 8.5, which for every storage is the case, there's going to be losses, storage losses, heat losses, so losses in transfer. So we know that batteries itself reduces the energy return on energy investment. So batteries itself are not energy efficient. That means the energy you use to put the energy you store in the battery, you cannot remove from the battery. So if you store energy, that means you're already understanding that you're going to energy losses. So I did my my BSc mechanical engineering. I did my project on solar. Then efficiency was about, that's 2004. Efficiency was about 7%. Now it's about 20 something percent, 21, 23% efficiency of solar panels. Now that's better, but you can see that you can see that it's still low on efficiency. It's still low. The efficiency of solar panels is low. The efficiency, and these things can also not be stored. If you are not storing it in batteries, which like I said earlier now, reduce your, excuse me, there's going to be greater energy loss. If you have to use it immediately, then you're going to have problems. In Germany, they have these problems at times when there's oversupply, and they more or less have to sell the energy for free because of the oversupply, because of lack of storage. So one of the things I want to think about when we're thinking about any energy project is energy return on energy investments. That will mean that EV cars are not really better energy-wise than ICE cars because of their batteries. That will mean that, solar panels, you have to look at the so now the energy return on energy investment of fuel, of oil, has really reduced because now we are spending more energy to drill because reserves are going low. So that's it's low now, but even then, it's almost matching the energy return on energy investment of these renewable energy sources. Now, think about it in 50 years, when these other things have depleted and we have to spend more energy to actually now mine the things we are going to use to build, then what would energy return on energy investment be like in that period? So, I've said about resource use, I've said about efficiency, and this is still, I was talking about meeting current needs, meeting our own needs. How are they able to, how is renewable energy sources able to meet my needs? This is things we are looking at. Okay, so I'm talking about this resource depletion. Now, I've said earlier that the materials used to build these artifacts are non-renewable. So, but there's something I want to say here, right? That I think is really important that a lot of people don't really consider is the fact that energy consumption per capita has almost doubled from 1965 to 2023, from 46 kilojoules per person to 78 kilojoules. I know the thing about this thing is, okay, so let's say we crack it and energy now becomes, is AROI is good, is more than 10, and you can use it. That means, it's really efficient now, it's in its 80s, like ICEs. German's paradox will say that if you make it cheaper, more of it will be used. That means it doesn't necessarily solve the problem of energy usage, which I think is one of the things I will talk about. I think we need to begin to look at as we go forward. Energy usage has increased, almost doubled in this number of years, and you begin to wonder what exactly is happening. And I'll give my point and my views about that in later slides. Also, nothing about renewable energy sources is that they need a lot of land, whether it's dams, whether it's solar, whether it's wind. These things affect valuation of land. I mean, first of all, if I want to bring renewable energy to a particular place, if the place was desert before and it costs so little, once people know the cost of valuation of surrounding land becomes expensive, because then everybody knows you're using this thing to get energy. So where we situate these things, either improves or reduces the valuation of land. In some places where aesthetics means something, bringing these renewable energy sources there reduces the valuation of land. That means you are affecting valuation of land regardless of other economic sources, just by situating a renewable energy project in that land. Oh, sorry, I've said going to future needs. I was focused on my slides. Okay, so our future needs, right? I said, like I've been discussing, the materials we are using are non-renewable. Some people think about circular economy. I've studied that a bit to realize not all things can be recycled. Things as simple as laminated paper cannot be recycled because it's a composite material. So the energy to first remove the lamination from the paper makes it difficult to recycle. So we realize that. And I think most people are not considering, or we are not considering a lot, is when these panels, their afterlife, how do we dispose? How do we dispose? How do we get more material, which the more we mine, the more expensive it becomes to mine, to build more panels or to build more wind turbines. Wind turbine blades cannot be recycled. I mean, made from composite materials cannot be recycled. So we are beginning to, obviously, the more we use, the less we leave for future generations to use. Our actions now affect the evaluation of land. What land is available for them to use for recreation? Something called value option in value option. Just by being there, you don't have to use it, but you know that if the day I want to use it, I can go to this land and for whatever I want to use it for, um whatever whatever I need to derive from it, I can derive from it. But once it's used for these things, once we take up land that are used for these things, the option does not exist for them. And that thing that I'm really concerned about is waste. One of the projects I did for my master's in my sustainable development was obsolescence, planned obsolescence. I'll say a couple of things. See, I'm an Arsenal fan. Why do we need to release jerseys every new season? New jerseys, why? The old jerseys are not bad. Why is it that iPhone you buy after a while it becomes obsolete because it's planned obsolescence? You can't use it in the ecosystem. You have to change it. Why? Why is it that most of the things that are being built now, they are being built to have most of the appliances we use, they're being built just to last for a time frame, and after that you have to change it. Why do we have fashion shows that if you wear things from last summer's fashion show, then you're not exactly, you're not trendy? Why do we have more of before when you bought your phones, look at the and you could easily change the battery yourself. It didn't work, you remove the battery, you put in another battery, and then you continue. But now, most of the phones are sealed. You cannot change the battery. In fact, most people would rather that you replace than you repair. When did we get into the point where the culture of replace rather than repair? Understand that all these things actually use up resource that are non-renewable. So for the artifacts we use, the panels we use, the windmills we use, we have to dispose of them in a particular way. And part of my sustainable development course, right? We talked about e-waste in Ghana, where they moved things from the global north to the global south. I think it will happen again, right? And then the toxic whatever in those things, right, seep into the ground and affect the landfills in the global south. Nobody's talking about it, but I personally think that the way this thing goes, after a while, we start moving old, damaged solar cells that close their end of life, either they're donating it to us, whatever reason, it will find their way from the global north to the global south. And when it comes here, we are going to have a now waste problem. Hopefully, it won't be really toxic. We are going to have a now waste problem, which is something that affects the ability of the future. Because, I mean, like you waste in Ghana now, the toxicity is in the soil. You can measure it. That affects what the other generations can use that place for. Hopefully, it's something we look at and we think there's something we should do about this. So, like I said, it's difficult, almost impossible to recycle wind turbine blades because they are composite. And the need for land use. So you have to, land use. So situate these things, whether you're building a dam, you're building a wind farm, you're building solar panels, you are going to have to need land. And the land I've used for that cannot be used for something else. That means the option does not exist for future generations. So this is more or less my last slide. I want to say a couple of things. First of all, are we reading the problem right? Are we seeing energy as a system on itself? Because energy is really complex. The way they run it in the UK, the way they have redundancies, the way they, 30 minutes before, what can you supply, what can you not supply? If you can oversupply, they pay you. If you can meet your supply target, you pay. Exceptional system to ensure that energy is constantly available because, well, they need energy is necessary for life. But are we reading the problem? Are we reading the problem right? Are we looking at it now? Should we look at energy as part of our lifestyle generally? It's one of the things we consider in transition engineering, right? We should look at energy as part of our lifestyle. That means other aspects of our lifestyle affect our need for energy. So, do we need lifestyle adjustments? Whether it's renewable or otherwise, yes, good thing about renewables is that we don't need fuel, in daily usage, but we need fuel to mine. We need fuel to, embedded energy. We need fuel to produce. We need fuel to, at times we need fuel to recycle or maybe to dispose. So if you look at these things and like, can we look at it differently and realize that energy It's not a standalone. Energy is part of the system of our lifestyle. That means that from if we change our lifestyle, our need for energy will reduce. And as almost as I mean a consequence, the CO2 emitted regardless will reduce. And if you're using renewable energy sources for that CO2, which I think in very minimum, we know that we are going to reduce the emissions that we produce. But if we continue on this path, if every day we increase our, and the way the world is going, AI data centers, the need for energy. I heard somebody say one of these future views um, programs that is that the global north will come for our technology or they'll come for our water. They will come for something because they need for cooling for the way the data centers are being built. The energy that they need is is enormous. But Alex wants to build modular data data centers. But if we continue along this path, renewable or otherwise, we are going to have a problem because the energy we consume will have its impact on the environment, and I think it will be irreversible. Second thing I want us to consider, then we'll discuss these things, right? Because I'll be stopping soon. Are we changing one flawed path, which is oil? We know the problem with oil and gas that was locked in. There's locking on that path. People have invested in those infrastructure towards that. So it's difficult to tell people that they just made $2 billion infrastructure and development infrastructure. Okay, leave this and go to something else. Economics will have to have a say. So the more you invest in a particular pathway, the more you are getting locked into that particular pathway. So they say oil and gas is not sustainable. Okay, we agree. But this other path that we are choosing now, are we sure that it is sustainable? Are we sure that the more infrastructure we build, the more we get locked into this path? Are we sure that it brings us to the picture that we have in mind? But somehow nobody's asking these questions. Even the UN, when you read some of their reports, they will just tell you, oh, renewable resources are greener, oh, they are better, oh, they are this, oh, they are that. I mean to think, dude, are they being mischievous on purpose, or is somebody not realizing that based on their own data also that CO2 emission hasn't decreased? So if it's as good as they say it is, does that not show that something is wrong? But the way these things are, it doesn't really those things are not really discussed at that level. Can we afford to get locked into another pathway that may not solve present challenges? So someone asked me, so what do I think? Well, I'm studying to know what the best option is. I won't say I have the answers, but I honestly believe the path to the right answers is by asking the right questions. I don't think presently we're asking the right questions. I think we're just leaving one path for another. We are just trying to assuage our conscience and not do the hard task, the difficult task that is necessary, to actually solve, because it's a wicked problem. It's not a linear problem. Move from fossil fuels to renewables, because renewable energy is intermittent at best. So it's going to be looking at something about an energy mix of some sort, right? Do we consider plurality of pathways? One of the major challenges I have with the world in general, and this in particular, is that we try to distill complex problems into linear problems so that we can propose easy solutions or easier solutions to those things. If it's a wicked problem, then we cannot provide solutions, simple solutions. But if it's a linear problem, we do more of this, we solve this, and then it goes by the energy itself. It's a wicked problem, something you need to look at. The social will have to affect how we live lives, our daily lives. Will have to affect how we transport. Will have to affect how we interact. Will have to affect a lot of other things about us. So we know, so that we can look for something that works for all concerned. So what role does our lifestyle play? I think one of the major drivers of the increase in energy, of the increase in CO2 emissions, is lifestyle that we live today, is the amount of waste we generate, is the amount of obsolescence that's going on around us, is the amount of where we discard things here and there. So generally, right, our lifestyle for me now plays a larger part than a larger contributes in more measures than even the choice in a sense of what energy option we take. And I'm not advocating for more fuel, but I'm saying there has to be something that we're going to discuss, okay, about our lifestyle, and the impact on the world around us. As a joke, right? One of my lecturers, when we were doing biodiversity offsetting, was saying that some people say, okay, let me keep manufacturing here, but you preserve this forest. Don't touch it. So it was like, okay, give me your dog, let me kill it. Then I'll get another dog in another place. That other dog in another place will keep it alive. Does that make sense to you? That this dog, let's kill it here. But the dog in Kenya, Nairobi, Kenya, will leave it, will look after it. But I was saying, let me keep doing what I'm doing, and I'll preserve this forest. The Amazon will preserve it, nobody should touch it. It really isn't the same thing, right? So that's what I was saying. Are we? Oh, someone asked the question. Okay. Oh, sorry, I'm not done. So I think we need to look at that. We need to look at the effect of our lifestyle and the effect of things around us on energy consumption, and maybe look for other ways to improve into to capture energy and bring it to you so that we don't harm the environment for ourselves and for those around us. Then Donella Meadows, when she talks about system thinking, she's one of the major people of system thinking. She's one of the higher value ones are paradigm changes. We say we can affect constants, we can affect a couple of other things, we can affect flows, in and out of the system, which I think is what we're doing. But it says the higher order, if you want to actually enforce change, is to look at paradigms. How are we thinking about the issue? So the question is, how are we thinking about energy? Is it the right way? Are we sure that if we follow this path that we presently are on, we're not going to get to a point where there will not be enough for the life that we have developed, and there will definitely not be enough for our children after us? Should we begin to rethink about it and think, okay, energy and other things are interconnected. So if you do more of this, then you have to do less of that. Things like that. We begin to ask ourselves hard questions about why do we need new jerseys every month? Why do we engage in so much planned obsolescence? Why do we say we are doing something right here, but the emissions have not reduced in any tangible way? So that's a question I think we need to ask, and that's one of the reasons I decided to engage this in this talk. So I will stop here and I will take questions and contributions basically.